The Witch's Dream Book and Fortune Teller, by A. H. No. Part 3. Palmistry. The practical part of chiromancy is that which gathers probable predictions from lines, the places of the planets in the hand, and from the notes and characters everywhere posted and marked out in the hands and fingers. These lines and their planetary relevancy are thus defined: 1. Cardiaca, or the line of life. 2. Hepatica, or the love's line, also called the natural mean. 3. Cephalica, or the line of the head and brain. 4. Thoralis, or the table line. 5. Restricta, or the dragon's tail. 6. Via Solis, or the sun's way. 7. Via Lactea, or the Milky Way. 8. Via Saturnia, or Saturn's way. 9. Cingulum Veneris, or the girdle of Venus. 10. Via Martis, or the way of Mars. 11. Mons Veneris, or the mound of Venus. 12. Cavia Martis, or the cave of Mars. 13. Mons Jovis, or Jupiter's mount. 14. Mons Saturn, or Saturn's mount. 15. Mons Solis, or the sun's mount. 16. Locus Luna, or the moon's place. 17. Mons Mercurii, or the mount of Mercury. 18. Mensa, or the table containing the part of fortune. 19. Pollex, or the thumb. 20. Index, or the forefinger. 21. Medius, or the middle finger. 22. Annularis, or the ring finger. 23. Auricularis, or the little finger. The question often arises as to whether judgment should be given by the right hand or the left. It is certain that in one hand the lines and other signatures are very often more manifest, and are thus more plain to be seen than the other. As well in the hands of gentlemen as ladies. That hand is the proper one, in both sexes, which shows and exhibits the lines thereof most clearly, and abounds with a series of characters and signs, yet so as that the other, whose lines are more obscure, may pay its contribution. If in both hands they consent, and appear to be fair and comely, they declare a constancy of fortune and health. The cause of diversity is that he who is born in the daytime, and has a masculine planet, the Sun, Saturn, Jupiter and Mars, lord of his geniture, bears the more remarkable signs in his right hand, especially when the sign ascending is also masculine. The contrary happens to those born at night, as often as a feminine planet predominates. If both hands agree, it must be that in a diurnal nativity the feminine planets rule, or that there falls out a mixture of masculine and feminine, so in the nights by the contrary reason. 1. Of the line of life. This is called cardiaca, or the heart line. This being broad, of a lively color, and decently drawn in its bounds, without intersections and points, shows the party long-lived and subject to few diseases. If slender, short and dissected with obverse little lines, and deformed either by a pale or black color, it presages weakness of the body, sickness and a short life. If orderly joined to the natural mean, and beautified in the angle with parallels, or a little across, it argues good wit, or an evenness of nature. If the same have branches in the upper parts thereof, extending themselves towards the natural mean, it signifies riches and honor. If these branches be extended towards the restricta, it threatens poverty, deceits, and unfaithfulness of servants. If in this line there be found some confused lines, like hairs, be assured of diseases, and they happen in the first age. When they appear below, if towards the cavia, in the middle, if towards the patica. In the declining age. If this line be anywhere broken, it threatens extreme danger of life in that part of the age which the pace of the breach shows. For you may find out the dangerous or diseased years of your age, this line being divided into 70 parts, you must begin your number and account from the lower part thereof, near the restricta, for the number falling where the branch is determines the year. If the character of the sun, as commonly it is made by astrologers, be ever found in this line, it presages the loss of an eye, but, if two such characters, the loss of both eyes. A line descending from the vital, beneath the congress of it and the hepatica, to the tuberculum of Saturn, shows an envious man, who rejoices at another's calamity, the sight of others concurring. This also frequently shows a most perilous Saturnine disease in that wherein it touches the vital, and it is much worse if it cut the same. But such a line passing from the vital to the annular, to the ring finger, promises honors to ensue, from or by the means of some famous lady. The vital lines being thicker than ordinary at the end under the forefinger, denotes a laborious old age. A line passing through the vitals to the cavea of Mars, foretells of wounds and fevers, and also of misfortunes in journeys. 2. Of the hepatica, or natural mean. This line being straight, continued, and not dissected by obverse little lines, denotes a healthful body. If it be short or broken, and reach not beyond the concave of the hand, it shows diseases and shortness of life. By how much more the same is produced, by so much longer the life may be warranted. If cut at the end thereof by a small intervening line, it threatens poverty in old age. If in the upper part it be distant from the vital by a great space, it shows distemperatures of the heart, as palpitations, syncope, etc. This also shows prodigality, especially if the table be broad. If tortuous, that is, if it wind and turn several ways, unequal, of a different color and dissected, it argues an evil constitution of the liver, and thence diseases, proceeding from the weakness thereof. Covetousness also, and a depravity both of nature and wit, especially if it be under the region of the middle finger, and near the cardiaca, thereby making a short or narrow triangle. If decently drawn and well colored, it is a sign of a cheerful and ingenious disposition. If it has a sister, it promises inheritances. If continued with some little hard knots, it denotes manslaughters, either perpetrated, or to be committed, according to the number of these said knots. If therein a cross be found under the region of the middle finger, it announces death to be at hand. If it terminates with a fork towards the ferient, it is a sign of depraved wit, of hypocrisy, and of evil manners. When it tends to the mensa, it is a token of a slanderous tongue and of envy. When it projects a remarkable cleft through the vital to the mons veneris, and the sister of Mars, especially if the same be of a ruddy color, it warns you to beware of thieves, and also intimates fraud and deceit of enemies. This cleft likewise insinuates a most vehement heat of the liver, proceeding from the rays of Mars, so that the life becomes in danger, seeing that the line of life is dissected. This line having some branch, yet such a one as nevertheless seems to be continued, shows that the manner of life will be, or is already changed, and this in a declining age if the breach be under the ring finger, but, if under the middle finger, in strength of years. 3. Of the cephalica. This is called the line of the head and brain, which, if, arising from its place in a due proportion, it connects the lines of the liver and heart in a triangular form, have a lively color, and no intersection falling out between. Declares a man of admirable prudence, and one of no vulgar wit and fortune. By how much more decent the triangle is, so much the better shall the temperature, wit and courage be, but if it be obtuse, it argues an evil-disposed nature, and a man that is rude, if no triangle, far worse. The superior being a right angle, or not very acute, foretells the best temperature of the heart, but when it is too acute, especially if it touch the line of life, upon the region of the middle finger, it argues covetousness. The left angle, if it be made upon the natural mean in the ferient, and be a right angle, confirms the goodness of intellect. But when the cephalica projects unequal clefts to the mons luni, thereby making unusual characters, in the gentleman it denotes weakness of the brain, and dangerous sea voyages. But in the lady's hand it shows frequent sorrows of mind, and difficulties in childbearing. Equal lines, thus projected, presage the contrary in both sexes, viz., in gentlemen, a good composure of the brain, and fortunate voyages by sea; in ladies, cheerfulness and felicity in childbearing. This one thing is peculiar to the cephalica: if it project a cleft or a manifest star, upwards to the cavea martis, it signifies boldness, etc. but if it let fall the same downwards. Thefts, etc. The cephalica, jointed to the dragon's tail by a remarkable concourse, promises a prudent and a joyful age. The same drawn upwards in the shape of a fork, towards the part of fortune, signifies subtlety in managing affairs, and also craftiness either to do good or evil. If in this said fork a mark appears resembling the part of fortune, as it is noticed by astrologers, that gives an assurance of riches and honor to succeed by ingenuity and art. 4. Of the Thoro line. This is also called the line of fortune. It is termed likewise the mensa, because it makes up the table of the hand. Which said line, when it is long enough, and without incisures, argues a due strength in the principal members of man, and also constancy, the contrary if it be short, crooked, cut or parted. If it terminate under the mount of Saturn, it shows a vain fellow. If projecting small branches to the mount of Jupiter, it promises honors. If there it be naked and simple, it is a sign of poverty and want. If cutting the mouth of Jupiter, cruelty of mind and disposition, with excessive wrath. If it projects a branch between the fore and middle finger in a gentleman, it threatens a wound in his head, in a lady, danger in childbearing. 3 lines ascending upwards from this line, viz., one to the space between the middle and forefinger, a second to the space between the middle and ring finger, and a third to the space between the ring and the little finger, argues a contentious person in many respects. A little line only thus drawn to the interval or space between the middle finger and the ring finger, sorrow or labor. If annexed to the natural mean, so that it makes an acute angle, it brings sorrow and labor. If the natural mean be wanting, and the thoral annexed to the vital, it threatens decollation or a deadly wound. If no mensa at all, it shows a man malevolent, contentious, faithless, inconstant and of base condition. Confused little lines in the mensa denote sickness, if under Mercury, in the former part of the age, under the Sun in the prime thereof, under the middle finger, in old age. When in this line there are certain points observed, they argue strength of the genitals and burning lust. 5. Of the cauda draconis, or the restricta, and the lines arising therefrom. If this be double or treble, and drawn by a right and continued track, it promises a good composure of the body. That line which is nearest the hand continued, and of a good color, assures great riches. But if the same line be cut in the middle, crooked and very pale, it announces debility of body and want of all things. A cross or star upon the restricta foreshadows tranquility of life in old age. If there be a star, simple or double, or any lines near the tuberculum of the thumb, in ladies, they denote misfortune or infamy. A line running from the restricta through the mons veneris presages adversities, either by the means of some kindred or a wife. A line extending from the restricta to the mons luni denotes adversities and private enemies. If it be crooked, it doubles the evil, and betokens perpetual servitude. Such a line also being clear and straight, and reaching as far as the region of the moon, foretells many journeys by sea and land. If it extend to the tuberculum of the forefinger, it informs the gentleman that he shall live in a foreign country in great estimation. If to the hepatica, it argues honest behavior, and prolongs life. If to the mons solis, be it simple or double, it argues exceeding goodness, and enables to govern or rule in great affairs. By the same reason, if it pass to the mons mercurii, it betokens the gentleman is of a sufficient capacity for any employment, but if it reach not the mons mercurii, but is broken about the middle and end beneath the mons mercurii, that makes out a prating fellow, etc. If directly ascending to the mons saturni, it signifies a good position of Saturn in the geniture, whose decree shall shortly follow, but, if crookedly towards the restricta and the hepatica especially, it shows man laborious, etc. 6. Of the via solis, or the sun's way. This being whole, equally drawn and well colored, promises the favor of great men and great honor, but, if dissected and unequal, the contrary, and exposes to divers impediments, and envy in attaining the same. 7. Of the via lactea, or the Milky Way. This well-proportioned and continued, presages that journeys will be fortunate both by sea and land, as ready wit and the favor of the ladies, Venus assenting, and of a composed and graceful speech, but if it be distorted, it argues infelicity and lies, but whole and ascending to the little finger, it is a sign of happiness. 8. Of the Saturnia, or line of Saturn. This being wholly and fully protracted to the middle finger, is an argument both of profound cogitations and likewise of fortunate events in counsels and actions. Combust or deficient, an evil sign, portending many misfortunes, unless other positions favor it. Bending backwards in the cavia of the hand, towards the ferient, in the form of a semicircle, threatens imprisonment. A line drawn from the vital, through the hepatica, to the tuberculum of Saturn, if it touch the Saturnia, the same. 9. Of the cingulum veneris, or the girdle of Venus. If this line have a sister, it argues intemperance and lust in both sexes, and baseness in the gratification of lewd desires, and if dissected and carefully examined, it shows losses and infamy by reason of this vice. 10. Of the Via Martis, the way or line of Mars, or the vital sister. This line, as often as it appears, augments and strengthens the things signified by the cardiaca, but particularly it promises good success in war, provided it be clear and read. Some observations concerning lines. The quantity of lines must be wisely observed, that is, the length and depth, so likewise their quality, that is, their complexion and shape, whether they are crooked or straight, next their action, which is to touch or cut other lines. Their passion to be touched or cut of others, and lastly, their place and position. We must know that the lines are sometimes prolonged until certain years of our age, otherwise shortened. Now they wax pale, then they become plain and strong, and as it were luxuriate with a kind of redness, and this as well in the principal as less principal lines. Again, as touching the less principal, and such as are found in the tubercula of the planets, it is most certain that some do at one time quite vanish, and that at another time others arise of a different shape and complexion, the cause of which is supposed to be no other than the various progressions of the alphabetical places in their nativities, that is, fortunate and unfortunate to the influence whereof man himself is wonderfully subject. The signs of his hands are presented at different times with different faces. Such a virtue, such a love resideth in the imagination of the greater world towards the lesser. And, therefore, the most studious in chiromancy cannot attain the knowledge of particulars by one inspection only, made to a certain year of the person's age, things that worthily merit our observations, yet known or approved of by a few. Of the planets. The planets also administer not a little judgment from their respective places, for if they are happy and benevolent, good things are portended. But being unhappy and froward, judge the contrary. Here we must also note that these planets are termed benevolent, in whose tubercula and places the accustomed lines are found equal, their characters fair and proportionable, as a cross, stars, 3 or 4 parallel lines, ladders, little branches, a quadrangular, the character of Jupiter. But the froward and unfortunate are those planets whose tubercula and places are deformed with troubled lines and uncouth figures, as a lame and interrupted semicircle gridiron's the character of Saturn. This is to be duly observed in the lines of the hand. Now, as touching the planets, let us proceed according to the general rules of art. 11. Of Venus. Venus shining well and happily, that is, when in her tuberculum, she presents a clear star, or furrows that are red and transversely parallel, and so often as her tuberculum is much elevated, make such men to be merry, cheerful and luxurious, yet amorous, comely and libidinous, very honest and just, with whom an uninterrupted tie of friendship once made is permanent. She renders the body somewhat tall, the eyes pleasant and sparkling with the splendor of beauty, full of allurement and temptation. The hair thick and curling, she instills a spotless and noble mind, yet oftentimes gives men that are full of boasting and inconsistency. She inclines the mind to music, etc. Sometimes according to the strength of the geniture, she produces priests, apothecaries, etc. But being unfortunate, she causes lasciviousness, incontinency and boasting, and if you find a cross also, near the first joint of the thumb, it denotes an adulterer, or such a person on whom a misfortune has happened in some luxurious matter. If the place of Venus be in tilde, it points out an effeminate, rude and sorrowful person, foolishly and ridiculously addicted to be merry and jesting. 12. Mars. Mars is fortunate, so often as his sister appears red, clear and decently drawn, and when either star or cross is found in his cavea. Thus, therefore, he denotes such as are bold and full of courage, stout, warlike, contentious, strong and lusty, imperious, the hair for the most part yellow, the eyes from black waxing red and terrible. If Jupiter participate, he possesses the gall, the reins, the back, the liver, etc. If with Venus, those parts of the body under her dominion. But if he be froward and unfortunate, he describes men to be litigious, violent, deceitful, passionate, etc. 13. Jupiter. Jupiter is happy or fortunate when in his region he exhibits signs that are auspicious, that is, if there be a star or double cross, parallel lines, or a line decently drawn from the vital to his tuberculum, etc. For thus he signifies men that are noble, honest, benevolent, affable, honorable, merry, just, equitable, beautiful, formidable and happy, such as have comely eyes, thick hairs and a grave gesture, likewise such as are bashful, and likewise such as will keep their promises, etc. These men are preferred to great dignities, and solicited by many great men, and do highly favor and esteem their wives, sons, honest and good men. In men, Jupiter rules the liver, blood, ribs, lungs and gristles. But, if he is unfortunate, he oftentimes throws a man headlong from a great estate to great calamities. If there be half a gridiron in his tuberculum, it betokens losses, especially by means of the more potent sort of women, otherwise thus constituted. He causes grief of the heart, cramps, inflammations of the lungs and other diseases proceeding from wind. If a line transversely cut his tuberculum, and afterwards tend to the place of Saturn, making those little hairs, it threatens apoplexy. But, if you find a cross especially, or a clear and red star in his tuberculum, he gives splendid honors, confers riches and public rewards from great personages or princes. 14. Saturn. Saturn is happily placed when we find his line wholly running to his region, but less happy when he presents some inauspicious characters. Unhappily, if he shows confused and unfortunate signs, he governs the spleen, bones and bladder. When he is fortunate he makes men silent, provident, of good and profound counsels, such as think and study much and are somewhat sorrowful, men that are puffed up with an ambitious spirit, and whose aim is honors. And these are slender of body, somewhat tall, pale and feeble, their hair blackish, eyes hollow, they are fortunate in tilling of ground, and in metals of all sorts, yet more careless of their wives, and less addicted to the pleasures of love, foolishly laughing and jesting, also tenacious and worldly minded, unjust, etc. But, if Saturn be unfortunate or froward, he makes men sorrowful, laborious, sordid, humble, covetous, liars, malicious, envious, etc., and encumbered with perpetual griefs and anxieties. A gross line running from the interval of the middle and forefinger to the mensa, and breaking or interrupting it, denotes diseases or wounds in the lower part of the body. 15. Soul. If the Sun fortunately rules, he makes men faithful, ingenious, honored, high-minded, wise, humane, religious, just, moderate, aged, and such as always manage their affairs honestly. He gives a body well composed, and adorns it with yellow hair. He governs the heart, midriff, nerves, etc. But, if unfortunate, he gives men that are proud and highly elated, manifesting their access to dignities by unjust means, boasters and immodest. He brings fluxes of rheum upon the eyes, and thereby hurts both them and the mouth, trembling of the heart, syncope, etc. 16. Luna. The moon happy and fortunate, makes men famous, honest and honorable and of a large body, yet well proportioned, pleasant also, and sometimes voyages by sea and walking by the sides of rivers, but, if any way dissenting in the other. Unconstant both in life and action, yet tending for the most part to the best. She rules the brain, stomach and belly, but if unfortunate she portends a various and inconstant kind of line, weakness, and increase of griefs and anxieties, she thus causes paralysis, etc. A commotion of the members, oftentimes an epilepsy and canker, spots in the body, severe colic, and whatever else proceeds from abundance of cold and moisture, and more especially when the lines found in the tuberculum of the moon do appear very pale. If there be fair and comely signatures near the ferient, they denote happiness to the man in his journeys and messages, and in foreign countries. To the woman, felicity and fertility in bearing of children, ominous signs do show the contrary. 17. Mercury. Mercury, happy and fortunate, makes men ingenious, desirous of science, and seeking diligently after secrets, such as are apt for any thing, orators, poets, philosophers, astrologicians, fortune-tellers, eloquent, variable, mathematicians, and men addicted to merchandise, etc. He governs the tongue and memory. 18. The Mensa, or part of fortune. This space being great and broad, and the figure decent, declares a liberal man, magnanimous and of long life. But if small and narrow, it indicates a slender fortune and fearfulness. A cross or star within it, clear and well proportioned, especially under the region of the ring finger, betokens honors and dignities to ensue from, or by means of great and noble personages. If the character of Jupiter, it then promises great ecclesiastical dignities, etc. The same star or cross tripled, portends good fortune, but if it be cut by confused little lines, the good fortune is thereby diverted, and anxieties and labors threatened in defending his honors. Especially if they are under the region of the ring finger. A cross or star in the uppermost part of the mensa is a sign of fortunate journeys. The mensa sharpened by the concourse of the thoral and cardiac lines, points out deceit and danger of life. If no mensa be shown in the hand, it shows obscurity both of life and fortune. Good and equal lines in this space do declare the fortune to be good, but if evil and decomposed they quite overthrow it. A little circle shows perfection of wit, and the obtaining of science, the others assenting thereunto. 19. The pollex, or thumb. Overthwart lines, that are clear and long underneath the nail and joint of the thumb, confer riches and honor. A line passing from the upper joint of the thumb to the cardiaca, threatens a violent death or danger by means of some married lady. Lines much dispersed in the lower joint of the thumb, describe men that are contentious, and such as rejoice in scolding, etc. A line surrounding the thumb, in the middle joint, portends the man shall be hanged. Equal furrows drawn under the lower joint thereof, argue riches and possessions. If the first or second joint want incisures, it shows drowsiness and idleness. 20. The index, or forefinger. Many lines in the uppermost joint, and they proceeding overthwartly, denote inheritances, by running so in the middle joint, an envious and evil-disposed person. Right lines running between these joints declare, in the ladies, a numerous issue, in gentlemen, bitterness of tongue. If they are in the first joint, near unto Jupiter's mouth, they manifest a jovial disposition, that is, they point to the man whom Jupiter favored well in his nativity. That who hath a star in the same place, may certainly be pronounced unchaste and lascivious. 21. Medius, or the middle finger, this finger presenting little gridirons in the joints thereof, plainly declares an unhappy and melancholy wit, but if equal lines, it manifests fortune by metals, etc. A star there presages a violent death by drowning, etc. If a gross line be extended from the root thereof, upwards, through the whole finger into the end of the last joint, it argues folly and madness. 22. Annularis, or the ring finger. A line arising from mons solis, and ascending by a right track through the joints thereof, it shows a noble frame. Equal lines in the first joint demonstrate honors and riches, overthwart lines, the enmity of great men. Howbeit, if these lines be intersected, it is better, because they argue impediments. 23. Auricularis, or little finger. From the joint thereof, as from the mouth itself, are judgments and decrees passed concerning merchandise, favors, and a star in its first joint near the tuberculum argues ingenuity and eloquence. Other obtuse signs the contrary, but when there appear unfortunate signs in the first and second joints, they mark out a thief and a very deceitful person. If adverse lines in the last joint, perpetual inconstancy. Some there are who predict the number of wives from the little lines in the mons mercurii at the outermost part of the hand, and have often observed them come at the truth. If the end of this finger reach not so far as to touch the last joint of the ring finger, it signifies a wife most imperious in all things, the truth thereof is often proved. Considerations on the mounts and fingers. As the mounts being adorned with good figures and characters indicate a good and happy issue, so likewise being vitiated with confused lines, they threaten the contrary, and this as well on the fingers as mounts, except they are restrained by the confederacy of other lines which are of themselves good and fortunate. There are likewise the 12 signs of the zodiac upon the fingers. The signification of the lines proceeding from the mounts of the different planets upon the fingers show their effect chiefly when the sun, or their principal significator, as lord of the ascendant, etc., is in these signs, ruling the parts where they terminate, as a line passing from the mount of Saturn to the first point of the middle finger would give improvement when the sun was in Pisces, if to the second, in Aquarius. Observe also that the first joint near the mount of the finger must be attributed to the first part of the age, the second to the prime of life, and the last unto old age. Lastly, the structure of the hand itself is really admirable in respect to the proportion it bears to the face, and certain parts thereof, which is this: the whole hand is of equal length with the face. The greater joint of the forefinger, which adjoins upon the tuberculum of Jupiter, equals the height of the forehead. The other two, to the extremity of the nail, are just the length of the nose, viz., from the intercilia, or place between the eyebrows, to the tip of the nostrils. The first and greater joint of the middle finger is just as long as it is between the bottom of the chin and the top of the under lip. But the third joint of the same finger is of equal length with the distance that is between the mouth and the lower part of the nostrils. The largest joint of the thumb gives the width of the mouth. The distance between the bottom of the chin and the top of the lower lip, the same. The lesser joint of the thumb is equal to the distance between the top of the lower lip and the lower part of the nostrils. The nails obtain just the half of their respective uppermost joints, which they call omicios. Of the nails of the fingers. Broad nails show the person to be bashful and fearful, but of a gentle nature. When there is a certain white mark at the extremity of them, it shows that the person has more honesty than subtlety, and that his worldly substance will be impaired through negligence. White nails and long denote much sickness and infirmity, especially fevers, and are an indication of strength and deceit in women. If upon the white anything appears at the extremity that is pale, it denotes short life by sudden death, and the person to be given to melancholy. When there appear a sudden mixed redness of divers colors at the beginning of the nail, it shows the person to be choleric and very quarrelsome. When the extremity is black, it is a sign of husbandry. Narrow nails denote the person to be inclined to mischief and to do injury to his neighbor. Long nails show the person to be good-natured, but mistrustful, and loves reconciliation rather than differences. Oblique nails signify deceit and want of courage. Little and round nails denote obstinate anger and hatred. If they be crooked at the extremity, they show pride and fierceness. Round nails show a choleric person, yet soon reconciled and a lover of secret sciences. Fleshy nails denote the person to be mild in temper, idle and lazy. Pale and black nails show the person to be very deceitful to his neighbor, and subject to many diseases. Red and marked nails signify a choleric and martial nature, given to cruelty, and as many little marks as there are, they speak of so many evil desires. Thus concludes The Witch's Dream Book and Fortune Teller Part 3. Palmistry by A. H. No. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out the next part in the series, Part 4 Celestial Palmistry, or one of the many more current or upcoming videos in the Weird Audiobooks YouTube library.